Parents demanded I transfer my penthouse for sister's baby. Dad, sign or prepare for court. I invested $190K. My attorney revealed their $400K insolvency debt scheme. Their lawyer went pale. My name is Paige Miller. I am 30 years old, and I live entirely alone in a penthouse apartment perched high above the suffocating noise and the endless concrete of the city. It is my sanctuary. It is the one place in this entire world where I am completely and utterly in control of my own life. Or, at least, it was right up until the very people who share my blood decided they were somehow entitled to take the keys from my hands. I will never forget the exact, sickening sound that the thick manila legal folder made as my father, Raymond, slid it across my custom glass dining table. It was a sharp, abrasive scrape in an otherwise dead-quiet room. The table was incredibly expensive, a piece of heavy teak and glass furniture that I had saved up for over several months, but my father did not care about my things. He was not sitting there to admire the home I had built. He was sitting there to claim it for himself and his favorite child. He looked me right in the eye, his expression completely devoid of the warmth or the love you would normally expect from a parent visiting their daughter's home. "Sign the quitclaim deed over to your sister," he said. His voice was not asking a question. It was a direct, unwavering order, delivered with a cold and hard finality. "Or we will take you to court." I felt a massive, heavy knot immediately form in the absolute pit of my stomach. It was not a knot of surprise, exactly, but one of profound, exhausting disappointment that physically ached. For a brief, pathetic second, I looked across the table at my mother, Susan, desperately hoping she would finally intervene. I hoped that just this once, she would act like a real mother and tell her husband he was crossing a line that could never be uncrossed. But she did not say a single word. She just sat there, rigid, staring blankly down at her lap, her hands folded tightly together. She would not even meet my eyes. She had always been a master at avoiding the ugly reality of the situations she helped create. Then I slowly turned my gaze toward my younger sister, Chelsea. She was sitting back in one of my expensive velvet dining chairs, completely relaxed, sporting a smug, deeply entitled little smile on her face. She was looking around the room, taking in the floor-to-ceiling windows, the skyline view, the modern quartz countertops in the kitchen, looking exactly like she already owned the place. Like she was mentally rearranging my hard-earned furniture to better fit her own personal tastes. They were sitting in my home. This was the 23rd floor penthouse that I had bought with my very own money, built on a foundation of sheer exhaustion and absolute isolation. I had worked relentlessly for 10 brutal years to get to this point. I had missed holidays. I had missed birthdays. I had worked double and triple shifts, surviving on caffeine and sheer willpower. I had saved every single penny I could scrape together, denying myself even the smallest comforts, while the three of them went on lavish vacations and lived perfectly comfortable lives. And now, they wanted to take it all away. Just like that. Because it was convenient for them. Underneath the heavy glass table, my hands were shaking violently. My heart was hammering against my ribs in a chaotic drumbeat of panic and pure, unadulterated rage. But I could not let them see me sweat. I could not give them the satisfaction of breaking me, not after everything I had survived. I took a deep, steadying breath, forcing the air down into my lungs until I felt my pulse slow just a fraction. I had spent a lifetime preparing for this exact moment, even if I had not realized it until now. I reached down beside my chair, picked up my own heavy leather briefcase, and placed it on the table right next to their pathetic legal folder. I unlatched it slowly, letting the metallic clicks echo in the silent room. "No," I said, keeping my voice terrifyingly calm. I looked at the three of them. I knew exactly how they saw me. To them, I am the ultimate villain in this story. They genuinely believe I am a selfish, heartless monster who refuses to share her wealth. They think they can bully me, guilt-trip me, and legally threaten me into total submission. But they are completely blind. They have absolutely no idea what I have sitting inside this briefcase. They're about to learn the truth the incredibly hard way. But to understand why I looked my father in the eye and dared him to destroy me, You have to understand the 28 years of invisible cuts that brought us to this table. You have to understand that growing up in the Miller household meant navigating a bizarre, unspoken caste system every single day. There were 2 daughters living under that roof, but only one of us was actually treated like a beloved child. The other was treated like a burden, an unpaid employee whose sole purpose was to exist quietly, cause 0 problems, and demand absolutely nothing. I was the employee. And I realized this indisputable fact for the very first time on the morning of my 16th birthday. It is a day that sticks in my mind like a jagged splinter forced deep under a fingernail. For many months leading up to that major milestone, I had done absolutely everything perfectly. I was a textbook overachiever, desperately trying to earn my parents' love and basic validation through sheer competence. I got straight A's in every single subject at school. I did my chores, and often Chelsea's chores, without ever having to be asked. On weekends, instead of hanging out at the local mall with friends, I babysat the neighborhood kids, hoarding the $5 bills in an old shoebox hidden in the back of my closet. I had been dropping massive, obvious hints about getting my driver's license for an entire year. I purposely left the state driver's manual sitting out on the living room coffee table where they could not miss it. I talked constantly about the cheap, heavily used sedans I found listed in the classifieds of the local newspaper, explicitly pointing out the ones that cost under $2,000. I just wanted mobility. I wanted freedom. I wanted to feel like a normal teenager. On the morning of my birthday, I woke up early. My stomach was doing flips with that nervous, excited energy you only get when you are young and still foolishly believe your parents might surprise you with something wonderful. I walked down the stairs and stepped into the kitchen. The scene was completely mundane and quiet. My mother was leaning against the counter, sipping her black coffee, looking half asleep. My father was sitting at the table, completely absorbed in the sports section of the morning paper. "Happy birthday, Paige," my mom said, her tone as casual and flat as if she were commenting on the weather. She pointed a manicured finger toward a small, flat box wrapped in cheap paper sitting next to the fruit bowl on the table. I walked over and tore the paper off, my heart racing. I opened the cardboard lid. Inside lay a piece of laminated plastic. It was a yearly transit pass for the city bus system. I just stared at it. My brain could not quite process the humiliation of the moment. I tried to force a smile, but the muscles in my face felt stiff and frozen in place. "Oh, thanks," I managed to choke out. "It's practical," my dad said gruffly. He did not even bother to look up from his newspaper. "Insurance is expensive, Paige. Gas is expensive. This will get you to school and back. It teaches you independence." I stood there, holding a piece of plastic that essentially told me my time, my comfort, and my teenage milestones were entirely worthless to them. "I thought maybe I could use the old sedan?" I asked quietly, my voice barely a whisper. "Since you guys have the new SUV now?" "We traded it in," my dad replied smoothly, finally turning the page of his paper. "Money doesn't grow on trees, Paige. You'll figure it out. You will figure it out." That specific phrase became the suffocating soundtrack of my entire life. I spent my 16th birthday walking a mile in a torrential downpour to wait for the number 42 bus. I rode it all the way to the mall, sitting entirely by myself in the very back row. The bus smelled heavily of old exhaust fumes and damp wool. I watched the rain streak against the dirty, scratched window, and I bought myself a single, pathetic vanilla cupcake from the food court. Sitting there at a sticky plastic table, picking at the cheap icing, I actively gaslit myself. I told myself it was fine. I rationalized it, telling myself that my parents were just being financially responsible with their money. We were just a normal middle-class family. Maybe things were incredibly tight right now. Maybe business was bad and they were struggling. I convinced myself that I needed to be the good, understanding daughter and not ask for too much. I swallowed the deep disappointment whole, and I believed that absolute lie for exactly 2 years. Exactly 2 years later, my younger sister, Chelsea, turned 16. The massive, undeniable contrast in how we were valued began the exact moment I opened my eyes that morning. The entire house smelled like sweet vanilla and butter. I walked downstairs to find my mother standing at the stove, cooking a massive, multi-course breakfast feast, pancakes, bacon, fresh fruit, something she had not done in years. Chelsea came bouncing down the stairs in her silk pajamas, looking sleepy, radiant, and utterly unbothered by life. "Happy birthday, baby," my mom squealed, her voice pitching up an entire octave. She dropped her spatula, ran over, and hugged Chelsea so fiercely she practically lifted her off the kitchen tiles. Then, my father walked in from the garage. He had a massive, genuine grin plastered across his face. It was a look of pure, unadulterated joy and pride, a look I realized, with a sickening, violent twist in my gut, he had never, not once, directed at me. "Come outside," he announced, gesturing toward the front door. "We have a surprise." I followed them out, hovering quietly on the front porch, wrapping my arms tightly around my chest to block out the morning chill. And there it was. Sitting right in the middle of our driveway was a white BMW. It was not fresh off the factory line, but it was incredibly close. The white paint gleamed flawlessly under the morning sun. Through the tinted window, I could see the soft, pristine beige leather seats. Sitting right on the center of the hood was a giant, ridiculous red velvet bow. Chelsea let out a scream. It was a high, piercing, deafening sound of pure, entitled delight. She ran barefoot across the concrete driveway, jumping up and down like she had just won the lottery. "Is it mine? Is it really mine?" she shrieked. "It's all yours, princess," my dad laughed. He reached into his pocket and tossed her a heavy set of keys, catching the light as they flew through the air. "We want you to be safe on the road. Only the best for you." I stood completely frozen on the wooden porch. The chill had seeped deeply into my bones. I looked down at my worn-out backpack, thinking about the faded, cracked bus pass sitting inside my cheap wallet. Then I looked back at the gleaming German engineering sitting proudly in our driveway. "Dad?" I asked. My voice came out incredibly small, shaky, and completely broken. "I thought you said insurance was too expensive." Raymond turned around slowly. His joyous smile faded instantly, replaced by a dark, hard look of absolute annoyance. He looked at me not like a daughter, but like a pest that was ruining his perfect, cinematic family moment. "Paige, don't be jealous." "It's an ugly look," he snapped harshly. "Your sister needs a reliable car. She has cheerleading practice. She has a social life. It's different." It was different. I had a social life, too, or at least I would have if I did not spend 3 agonizing hours a day transferring between filthy city buses. But from that day forward, the divide was not just a feeling, it was a physical monument parked right in our driveway. Every single morning, I would walk to the bus stop. I walked in the freezing rain, through thick winter snow, and in the suffocating humidity of late August. I would stand under the rusted metal shelter, shivering, and watch Chelsea drive right past me. She would have the windows rolled down, pop music blasting out of the premium speakers, her friends laughing loudly in the passenger seat. She never hit the brakes. She never once stopped. She never once offered her older sister a ride. And my parents never told her she had to. "It builds character, Paige," my mom would say dismissively when I trudged through the front door, soaked to the bone and shivering uncontrollably. "Struggling a little makes you tough." They were right about one thing. It did make me tough. It made me cold, calculating, and fiercely independent. But the true depth of their financial and emotional betrayal had not even begun. When it came time for college, the exact same dynamic repeated itself, but the financial stakes became completely life-altering. I sat at the kitchen table, staring down at my thick acceptance envelopes. I had gotten into the state university. It was an excellent school, highly competitive, and I had bled over my textbooks for 4 straight years to secure the grades necessary to get in. I looked across the table at my parents. "We need to talk about tuition," I said, my voice tight with anticipation and anxiety. My dad let out a long, theatrical sigh. It was the kind of heavy, burdened sigh that suggested I was an ungrateful child asking for the moon to be handed to me on a silver platter. "Honey, business has been incredibly slow this year," he started, rubbing his temples as if I were giving him a massive headache. The market is down. We just don't have the liquidity to pay for college right now. I felt a massive, hollow pit open up in my stomach. But what about my college fund? I pleaded, my voice cracking. You talked about it constantly when we were kids. You said you were saving. My mom would not look me in the eye. She stared at a spot on the wall behind my head. We had to dip into it, she said vaguely, waving her hand. Expenses come up, Paige. The roof needed fixing. The cars needed maintenance. The cars needed maintenance. The white BMW needed maintenance. That is what she meant. They had drained my entire future to pay for my sister's luxury vehicle. So, what am I supposed to do? I asked, pure desperation creeping into my tone. Loans, my dad said instantly, as if it was the most obvious, casual thing in the world. Take out student loans. It's good debt. And you can work part-time. You're a smart girl, Paige. You'll figure it out. So I did. I signed binding legal papers, putting myself tens of thousands of dollars into crippling debt at just 18 years old. I packed my bags in the old sedan and moved into a cramped, depressing dorm room that perpetually smelled like damp concrete and old socks. To keep myself completely afloat, I got a grueling job working the overnight shift at a dingy, 24-hour diner situated right on the edge of the university campus. My life quickly devolved into a militant schedule of pure, exhausting survival. I went to intense lectures from 8 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon. I sat in the silent library and studied until 6. I would crawl into my narrow twin bed and sleep for exactly 3 hours. Then, I would wake up in the pitch dark, put on my grease-stained uniform, and work at the diner from 10 at night until 6 in the morning. I became a walking zombie. I had dark, purple bags under my eyes that simply never went away. I lost a terrifying amount of weight because I simply could not afford the expensive campus meal plan. My dinner, more often than not, consisted of a bag of stale barbecue chips bought from a vending machine in the science building, or a handful of leftover, cold French fries from the diner that the line cooks were about to throw into the trash. I wore my cheap sneakers until the friction literally burned holes straight through the rubber soles, letting the winter slush soak my socks every time it snowed. I did not go to frat parties. I did not join social clubs. I certainly did not go anywhere for spring break. While my peers were finding themselves, I was scrubbing industrial grills, working, studying, and surviving. 2 incredibly long years later, Chelsea graduated high school, and the true depth of the double standard was finally revealed. Chelsea graduated from high school with transcripts that were an absolute disaster. Her grades were barely passing, skating by on pure charm and relentless parental intervention. Naturally, she turned up her nose at the state university. She decided, out of the blue, that she wanted to go to a highly exclusive, private liberal arts college located right on the beach down in Florida. The tuition alone cost 3 times what my entire degree was going to cost. I waited. I waited for the heavy sigh from my father. I waited for my dad to sit her down at the kitchen table and give her the grim, "Business is slow, we lack liquidity" speech. I waited for them to hand her a thick stack of federal loan applications. Instead, I logged onto Facebook and saw a glowing post from my mother. It featured a picture of Chelsea standing next to a mountain of expensive luggage. The caption read, "So incredibly proud of our baby girl heading off to Florida in the fall. We are so happy and blessed to give her this amazing opportunity." They did not make her take out a single loan. They paid for absolutely everything in cash. They paid full out-of-state private tuition. They rented her a luxury, off-campus apartment with a pool because she complained the standard dorms were too cramped. They paid thousands of dollars for her elite sorority membership dues. They even bought her a premium meal plan, which she completely ignored because she ate out at high-end seafood restaurants with her friends every single night. I watched it all unfold through a cracked digital screen. I would sit in the damp, freezing local laundromat, physically exhausted, smelling like old fryer oil, counting out literal quarters just to wash my diner uniform while scrolling through my feed. I saw pictures of Chelsea holding a massive, sugary margarita on a rented yacht in Cancun for spring break. I saw Chelsea deeply tanned, wearing designer sunglasses that cost more than my monthly grocery budget. She was living the exact luxury life I was explicitly told our family could not afford. One night, the physical and emotional exhaustion finally broke me. I sat on the dirty floor of the laundromat, put my face in my hands, and sobbed. I pulled out my cheap phone and called my dad. "Dad, how can you pay for her school and not mine?" I cried, the betrayal burning like acid in my throat. "I'm working night shifts. I am so exhausted." The line was quiet for a second before his voice came back, dripping with icy contempt. "Don't count other people's money, Paige," he snapped aggressively. "It's rude. Your sister needs more support than you do. You are naturally capable." I stopped crying instantly, stunned into silence. "She needs a little help to find her footing," he continued, completely oblivious to my pain. "You should be happy for her." That was the narrative. That was the established law of the Miller household. It hit me like a physical blow to the chest. Because I was tough, because I was naturally capable, I deserved absolutely nothing. Because she was needy, incompetent, and manipulative, she deserved everything. But that absolute, crushing neglect ended up giving me the one thing that would eventually save my life. It gave me the mental clarity to stop viewing them as a family and start viewing them as a liability. And shortly after that, the universe gave me Fiona Thorne. It happened during the spring semester of my junior year. Despite my insane, sleep-deprived schedule, I had managed to land a corporate internship at a massive, regional logistics company. It was paid, which was the absolute only reason I took it, allowing me to finally drop a few of the soul-crushing night shifts at the diner. It was a Friday night, way past 8 o'clock in the evening. The entire office floor was deserted, the overhead fluorescent lights humming quietly in the silence. I was sitting at my small cubicle, meticulously filing a massive stack of complex shipping manifests so the Monday morning crew could start the week ahead of schedule. Suddenly, the heavy oak door to the executive suite opened. Out walked Fiona Thorne. Fiona was the CEO of the entire operation. She was a formidable woman in her late 50s, with razor-sharp facial features and an intense aura of absolute authority. She always wore impeccably tailored gray suits. She stopped dead in her tracks when she saw me typing away in the dim light. "Miller," she said, her voice echoing in the empty space. "Why are you still here? It's 8 at night on a Friday." "I wanted to finish organizing the shipping manifests for Monday, Ms. Thorne," I replied, sitting up straight. "So we can start the week ahead." She walked slowly over to my cubicle, looking at me intently. I mean, she really looked at me. She saw the dark circles, the cheap clothes, the sheer exhaustion radiating from my bones. She sat gently on the edge of my desk. "You're the one who works at the diner, right?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am." "And you go to school full-time?" "Yes, ma'am." She nodded slowly, her sharp gray eyes piercing right through my professional facade. "You're hungry." "I'm okay," I lied smoothly. Exactly 1 second later, my completely empty stomach let out a loud, hollow growl that echoed in the quiet office. Fiona actually laughed. It was not a mocking laugh, but a dry, rasping sound of deep understanding. She unclasped her designer purse, reached inside, and pulled out a crisp $20 bill. "Go get food." "Real food, not chips," she ordered. "I can't take your money," I stammered, my face flushing with embarrassment. "Take it," she commanded, leaving absolutely no room for argument. "And listen to me." I took the bill, my fingers trembling slightly. "You work hard, Paige," Fiona said, her tone turning deadly serious. "That's rare. But hard work alone won't save you. People will take advantage of hard workers. They will milk you dry and then ask why you aren't producing milk anymore." She leaned in closer. "You need to protect yourself, Paige. Document everything in business and in life." I stopped breathing for a second, hanging on to every word. "Track every dollar like it's evidence in a murder trial," she continued, her voice low and intense. "Keep receipts, keep emails, keep dates, because one day someone is going to try to rewrite history." She looked right into my eyes. "And when that day comes, you need to be able to slap a binder on the table and say, 'No, this is what happened.'" I did not fully comprehend it sitting in that cubicle, but Fiona Thorne was not just teaching me how to be a good corporate employee. She was handing me the exact weapon I would eventually use to kill my family's lies. From that Friday forward, I became quietly obsessed. I bought a high-quality digital scanner. I scanned every single paycheck. I scanned every tuition bill. I built a massive, encrypted spreadsheet tracking every single dollar I spent. More importantly, I saved every toxic text message my parents sent me refusing to help. I wasn't doing it for revenge. Not yet. I was doing it because Fiona told me to, and because it was the only control I had in a life where I felt entirely powerless. I had absolutely no idea that 10 years later, those pieces of paper would be the only thing standing between me and losing everything. If you are listening to this and you know exactly how it feels to be the capable one who gets drained by the people you love, please do me a favor. Don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and let us know in the comments which city you're watching from. Every comment helps the video reach more people. Thank you so much. By the time I hit 28 years old, the traumatized, exhausted girl on the bus had transformed into an absolute powerhouse. I graduated from the university with high honors. I took Fiona's advice, outworked everyone in the room, and turned that unpaid internship into a highly lucrative full-time job, and then turned that job into a massive career. Over the next few years, I climbed the corporate ladder fast. I became a senior consultant for supply chain management. My job was to fly around the country, walk into massive corporations, and solve their expensive problems, and they paid me very well for it. But I did not let the money change my habits. For 5 straight years after college, I lived like an absolute monk. I aggressively paid off my student loans. I stayed in a tiny, drafty studio apartment. I drove a reliable, heavily used Honda. I wore simple clothes. Every massive corporate bonus, every promotion raise, every spare dollar I earned went directly to the debt. I remember the exact afternoon I made the final payment. I sat in my parked car and cried violently for 10 minutes. It was not sadness. It was the crushing weight of gravity finally letting go. I was free. Then I started saving. My bank account grew and grew. While I was building my absolute fortune, Chelsea was burning through whatever safety net my parents desperately provided. She graduated from her expensive beach college with a degree in art history, but naturally, she never used it. She moved right back home with mom and dad. She floated through a series of odd jobs: receptionist, dog walker, yoga instructor, but quit them whenever she got bored or stressed. When she inevitably crashed the BMW, my parents quietly went into more debt to buy her a new car. When she racked up insane shopping bills, they secretly paid off her credit cards. I watched it all happen from a safe distance. I stopped asking them for fairness. I just focused entirely on my goal. I wanted a home, a real home, a massive, undeniable physical fortress that no one could ever kick me out of. I wanted a place where I didn't have to sleep in a drafty room or listen to my parents tell me I was a burden. I found the Penthouse on a rainy Tuesday in November. My realtor, a nice woman named Courtney, took me to the top of a brand new high-rise downtown. We stepped out of the private elevator, and she unlocked the heavy oak door. I walked in and my breath physically hitched in my throat. It was magnificent. It was on the 23rd floor. The entire south wall was solid glass. The city lay spread out below me like a glittering carpet of lights. There were 3 bedrooms, a massive kitchen with pristine quartz countertops, and hardwood floors that gleamed. But mostly, it was quiet. That was the very first thing I noticed. It was high above the noise of the traffic, and more importantly, it was high above the noise of my family. "It's a lot of space for one person," Courtney said, watching my face carefully. "I'll grow into it," I whispered. The price was incredibly high. It was a stretch, but I had the money. I had the down payment sitting in my savings account, ready to go. "I'll take it," I said without hesitation. The closing process took a month. Every single time I had to sign a legal document, I felt a massive surge of pride. Buyer name, Paige Miller. Just me. No cosigner, no husband, no daddy to bail me out. Just Paige. I put down $84,000 in cold, hard cash. It was the biggest check I had ever written in my entire life. I watched the bank teller process it. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from pure, unadulterated adrenaline. When I finally got the keys, I didn't move my furniture in right away. I went there completely alone that night. I brought a sleeping bag and a bottle of cheap champagne. I slept on the hard floor of the empty living room. I woke up to the sunrise flooding the apartment with golden light. I felt safe. For the very first time in my entire life, I felt completely, utterly safe. I had absolutely no idea they were already plotting to take it from me. I spent the next 2 entire months slowly and meticulously furnishing my new sanctuary. I did not buy cheap, particle board furniture this time around. I bought a luxurious, deep emerald velvet sofa. I bought a heavy teak dining table that could seat 8 people, even though I lived alone. I bought actual, framed art for the walls instead of taping up posters. I turned the second bedroom into a beautiful guest room, and I turned the third bedroom into my dedicated home office. My home office became my ultimate command center. I bought a heavy, fireproof safe and bolted it to the floor. Inside that safe, I placed the original deed to the penthouse. I put the purchase agreement inside. I put every single receipt for the furniture inside. Fiona Thorne's voice was always echoing in the back of my head, reminding me to track every single dollar. Finally, when everything was perfect, I was ready. I foolishly invited my family over for a housewarming dinner. I know it sounds incredibly stupid after everything they had already done to me, after years of neglect and blatant favoritism, but the inner child in me still desperately wanted my dad to pat me on the back. I still desperately wanted my mom to hug me and say, "Wow, Paige, you did good." I spent 2 entire days cooking and preparing. I made a perfect roast chicken with fresh herbs. I made a complicated, expensive salad with goat cheese and toasted walnuts. I bought several bottles of fine wine. They arrived 20 minutes late. I buzzed them up from the lobby, my heart racing with anticipation. When the private elevator doors opened, Chelsea walked out first. She was wearing heavy, muddy winter boots. She completely ignored the welcome mat and walked right onto my brand new, gleaming hardwood floors without even attempting to wipe her feet. "Whoa," she said, her voice dripping with an odd mix of awe and annoyance. She did not even look at me. She walked straight to the massive windows and looked at the skyline. Crazy view. My mom, Susan, and my dad, Raymond, followed closely behind her. My dad did not say hello. He immediately started looking around the entryway, inspecting the corners, checking for cracks in the paint, actively looking for flaws in my achievement. "Hello, everyone. Welcome," I said, opening my arms for a hug. "Hi, honey," my mom said. She gave me a weak, one-armed side hug. She pulled back and looked around the massive living room. Her face was completely blank. "It's very modern," she said. She used the word modern like it was a terrible insult, like it meant cold and uninviting. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" I asked, pathetically fishing for just one single compliment. My dad walked over to the window, standing next to Chelsea. "What's the exact square footage?" he asked, crossing his arms. 2,000, I said proudly. "And the homeowners association fees?" he asked, narrowing his eyes. "Must be an absolute killer in a luxury building with a full-time doorman." "I can handle it, Dad," I said, my smile faltering slightly. He just grunted. "Better hope the corporate market doesn't crash. You are leveraged pretty high here, Paige. Could be a massive mistake." That was his entire reaction. Not a single word of congratulations. Just a grim warning that I might fail and lose everything. Chelsea wandered into my pristine kitchen and opened my stainless steel refrigerator without asking. "Do you have any beer?" she asked loudly. "I don't really like wine." "No, sorry. I have water or artisan juice," I said. She rolled her eyes dramatically. "Ugh, fine." She grabbed a bottle of water, walked over, and flopped carelessly onto my brand new emerald velvet sofa. She swung her legs up and put her feet right onto the teak coffee table. Her boots were still covered in street mud. "Chelsea, please take your feet down," I said gently, trying to keep the peace. "That's a new table." "Chill out," she muttered, not moving an inch. It's just furniture. You act like this place is a museum. We eventually sat down for dinner, and the conversation was incredibly painful. My mom picked at the expensive salad, complaining that the goat cheese was too strong. My dad scoffed when I mentioned I had a dedicated home office, telling me that since I worked on a laptop, I could easily do that at the kitchen table. He loudly wondered why a single girl needed 3 bedrooms, asking if I planned on taking and paying boarders to cover my massive debt. Every word out of their mouths was designed to minimize my success and maximize my insecurity. After the painful dinner finally concluded, Chelsea took out her smartphone. She began wandering around my entire apartment, taking endless selfies. She went into my master bathroom and took a picture sitting on the edge of my deep soaking tub. She went out onto my private balcony and took a picture leaning against the glass railing with the city lights glowing behind her. She posted them all directly to Instagram. I felt my phone buzz in my pocket with a notification a few minutes later. I opened the app. The main photo was of Chelsea holding a glass of my expensive red wine, standing right in front of my floor-to-ceiling window. The caption she wrote made my blood boil. It read, "Penthouse vibes tonight. Finally, a place that absolutely fits my style. Hashtag city life, hashtag skyline views, hashtag blessed." She did not tag me in the photo. She did not mention, even in passing, that she was visiting her older sister's new home. She framed it entirely to look like she was the one living the high life. The comments from our extended family and her friends started rolling in immediately. "Oh my God, Chelsea, did you move? So incredibly jealous." Another wrote, "You deserve it, girl." Chelsea actively liked every single comment. She did not correct a single person. And the absolute worst part? My mother, Susan, commented on the post. She wrote one single word, "Nice." I looked across my dining table at my father. He was casually picking his teeth with a wooden toothpick, looking incredibly bored. "So," he said, flicking the toothpick onto his empty plate, "how much did this place actually cost you? What is the bottom line?" I took a breath and told him the exact number. He whistled loudly, shaking his head. "That is a whole lot of debt, Paige. A massive amount of debt. I really hope you know what you're doing." They left exactly an hour later. They did not offer to help clean up the dishes. They did not bring a housewarming gift. They did not even bring a cheap $3 greeting card. I stood at the door and locked the heavy deadbolt behind them. The silence of the penthouse returned, but this time, it did not feel peaceful or safe. It felt incredibly lonely and deeply violating. I walked back into the kitchen and started scrubbing the dirty dishes. I scrubbed the pots and pans until my hands were bright red and raw. I was angry. I was so incredibly angry that my entire body was shaking. Why couldn't they just be happy for me for one single evening? Why did absolutely everything have to be a competition about what I had and what Chelsea supposedly deserved? I finished cleaning the kitchen, poured myself another large glass of wine, and walked straight into my home office. I opened the heavy floor safe. I took out the thick black binder. I sat at my desk for an hour, meticulously organizing the official closing papers. I hole-punched the grocery receipt for the expensive dinner I had just cooked them. I printed out a full-color screenshot of Chelsea's fraudulent, #blessed Instagram post. Then my phone vibrated on the desk. It was a text message from my mom, sent right after they pulled into their suburban driveway. It read, "Thanks for dinner. Chelsea is really depressed now seeing how you live. I hope you're happy making your sister feel inadequate." I stared at the glowing screen, a cold realization washing over my entire body. I printed that text message out, punched holes in it, and snapped it right into the binder. I realized something profound that night, sitting alone in the quiet sky. My family did not love me. They merely tolerated my existence, and they actively resented my financial success because it highlighted their absolute failure in raising Chelsea. I opened the front pocket of the binder and looked at the official deed again. Paige Miller. "This is mine," I said out loud to the empty room, my voice echoing off the glass walls. "This is mine, and I will never, ever let you touch it." I closed the binder. The sharp snap of the metal ring sounded exactly like a gunshot. I put it back into the safe and spun the dial. I thought that was the end of it. I had absolutely no idea they were going to wait 2 years to launch an all-out assault on my life. Exactly 2 years passed after that disastrous housewarming party. I was 30 years old, incredibly established in my career, and perfectly content in my isolation. I had built a life that was quiet, highly organized, and most importantly, entirely mine. The boundaries I had silently erected between my family and my penthouse were holding up perfectly well. Then, my phone rang on a random Tuesday evening. I looked at the caller ID and saw it was my mother. I almost let it go to voicemail, but a lingering sense of obligation forced me to answer. "Paige," she said the moment the line connected. Her voice was completely different. It was unusually high-pitched, breathless, and laced with a strange, manic excitement. "Your father and I want to come over for dinner this Saturday. We are bringing Chelsea. We have some news." "News?" I asked, immediately feeling that familiar, defensive tightening in the center of my chest. "Is everything okay?" "It's good news," she insisted quickly. "Great news, actually. But we absolutely need to discuss it as a family in your space. It's much more private than a busy restaurant." "Okay," I said hesitantly, my mind racing through all the terrible possibilities. "Saturday at 7. Perfect. Make something nice, will you?" she added, before hanging up without saying goodbye. I spent the entire day on Saturday preparing. It is incredibly pathetic, but even at 30 years old, even after everything they had put me through, I still subconsciously wanted to impress them. I went to a high-end butcher and bought an expensive cut of prime roast beef. I bought fresh rosemary and thyme. I made creamy mashed potatoes entirely from scratch, using heavy cream and Real butter, exactly the way my dad liked them. I polished the crystal wine glasses until they sparkled. I set the teak dining table with heavy cloth napkins. Before they arrived, I looked around my apartment. It was absolutely spotless. The city lights were just starting to twinkle through the floor-to-ceiling windows as the sun set. It looked like a photograph straight out of an architectural magazine. I felt a surge of pride. Surely, tonight, they would see me as an equal. They arrived exactly at 7 o'clock on the dot. This was the very first major warning sign. My family was chronically, unapologetically late to everything. Punctuality meant they were eager, and their eagerness terrified me. When I opened the heavy oak door, Chelsea walked in first. She was practically glowing. She was wearing a tight, ribbed knit dress that very clearly showed a small, undeniable bump in her stomach. "I'm pregnant," she squealed at the top of her lungs before I could even say hello. My jaw physically dropped. "Chelsea, oh my gosh." I stepped forward and hugged her tightly. And I genuinely meant it. Despite all the bitterness, despite the vast canyon between us, I loved my sister. A baby was a blessing. I wanted her to be happy. "Who is the father?" I asked, pulling back and looking at her face. Chelsea's bright smile faltered for a fraction of a split second, a shadow crossing her eyes before she instantly recovered. "It's complicated," she said dismissively, waving her hand. "Derek and I are taking a break. He's not around right now, but it doesn't matter. I have Mom, and I have Dad, and I have you." My parents walked into the foyer right behind her. They were beaming like they had just won the lottery. My dad was carrying a chilled bottle of expensive sparkling cider. "We are going to be grandparents," my dad announced, clapping his large hands together. He looked right at me, and for the very first time in years, he smiled at me with genuine, unadulterated warmth. "Can you believe it, Paige? A brand new baby in the family." "It's wonderful," I said, taking their heavy winter coats and hanging them in the closet. "Come in. Dinner is almost ready." The first hour was absolute perfection. It was a Trojan horse made of smiles and cider. We sat in the living room, drinking, laughing, and talking about baby names. We talked about cribs, strollers, and the color of the nursery. My mom even pulled out a half-finished yellow blanket she was knitting. The thick, suffocating tension that usually existed between us seemed to have completely evaporated into thin air. I felt included. I felt, for one brief, fleeting moment, like I was actually part of a loving family. Then, we sat down at the table and the trap was sprung. I served the dinner. The prime roast beef was cooked to absolute perfection. The potatoes were rich and creamy. We ate in a comfortable, happy silence for a few minutes. Paige, my dad said, taking a massive bite of the beef. You really learned how to cook. This is fantastic. Thanks, Dad, I said, feeling my face actually flush with unexpected pleasure. You know, my mom said, slowly putting her silver fork down onto her plate. She looked around the massive room, taking in the high ceilings and the panoramic view of the glowing city. This apartment really is stunning, Paige. The view, the sheer amount of space. And it is very safe here. It is a highly secure building. It is, I agreed, nodding. That is exactly why I bought it. My mom looked directly across the table at my dad. A totally silent, heavily rehearsed signal passed between their eyes. The air in the room changed instantly. It was like someone had opened a window to a blizzard. The artificial warmth completely evaporated, and the temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. My dad cleared his throat loudly. He took a slow sip of his ice water. Paige, he said. His voice was completely different now. It was serious. It was businesslike. We need to talk about the future. With the new baby coming, things are going to change drastically. Of course, I said, trying to follow his logic. Is Chelsea moving back into her old, larger room at your house? Chelsea let out a dramatic, exaggerated sigh. She looked down at her plate, playing with a piece of potato. My old room is so incredibly small, Paige. And Mom and Dad's house, it's old. It's extremely drafty in the winter. The wooden stairs are too steep. Mom and Dad are getting older, and they can't help me up and down constantly. It is simply not a good, healthy environment for a newborn baby. And Chelsea is doing this entirely alone right now, my mom added, leaning forward, her eyes boring directly into mine. She needs absolute stability. She needs a sanctuary. I nodded slowly, still not understanding the trap. So, she's going to rent her own apartment? She cannot afford that, my dad said bluntly, completely cutting me off. She is not working right now due to the stress of the pregnancy. She needs to focus entirely on her health and the baby's health. Okay, I said, my brow furrowing in deep confusion. So, what exactly is the plan? My dad leaned forward. He placed his two large hands completely flat on my expensive teak dining table. He stared at me with dead, unblinking eyes. We think it is best, he said slowly, enunciating every single syllable, if you let Chelsea have the penthouse. I stopped chewing. I froze completely. I stared at him, my brain desperately trying to process the insane words that had just left his mouth. I'm sorry, let her have it? You mean, you want her to stay in my guest room for a few weeks after the baby is born? No, Chelsea said sharply. She looked up, her eyes suddenly wide and wet with highly practiced, manipulative tears. We mean you move out, and I move in. I let out a short, sharp laugh. It was a purely nervous, involuntary sound. You want me to pack up and move out of my own home? It makes the most logical sense, my mom said rapidly, her tone turning defensive. You are totally single, Paige. You are just one person. You have 3 massive bedrooms here. It is excessive. It is completely selfish, really, to hoard all of this incredible space when your younger sister is bringing a new life into the world. Selfish, I repeated, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. Chelsea needs the security, my dad pressed, his voice rising in volume. This building has a full-time doorman. It has a secure elevator. It is absolutely perfect for a vulnerable young mother. And where exactly am I supposed to go? I asked, my voice starting to tremble with rising fury. You have plenty of money, my dad said dismissively, waving his hand as if my life was a minor inconvenience. You have a great corporate job. You can easily go rent a nice, small studio somewhere or buy a much smaller condo in the suburbs. Something that actually fits your single lifestyle better. My lifestyle is living in the home that I paid for, I said, my voice hardening into steel. That was the moment my dad reached inside his jacket pocket. My dad pulled a thick, legal manila folder from inside his jacket. He slid it across the glass section of the table, stopping right next to the plate of expensive roast beef. We have had a lawyer, a friend of mine, draw up some official papers, he said smoothly. It is a standard quitclaim deed. You sign the title of the property over to Chelsea. We will put the deed entirely in her name tonight. I stared at the brown folder as if it were a venomous snake. You want me to literally give her $1 million apartment? Just give it to her. We are not being unreasonable here, my dad said, leaning back in his chair like a negotiator closing a minor deal. We know you have a massive mortgage on this place. We fully expect you to keep paying that monthly note. Think of it as your financial contribution to your new nephew. A gift. The room physically spun around me. The absolute audacity was paralyzing. They did not just want to steal my house. They wanted me to leave, live somewhere else, and continue paying thousands of dollars a month on a penthouse mortgage so that Chelsea could live here for free. You want me to move out? I said incredibly slowly, trying to grasp the sheer insanity of the extortion. Give Chelsea the legal deed and keep paying the mortgage. Family helps family, Paige, my mom said. She reached out across the table and tried to touch my hand. Her skin felt ice cold. Paige, don't be difficult about this. This is for the baby. I violently pulled my hand away from hers. I looked at Chelsea. She was not looking at me. She was looking around the living room, mentally painting the walls and placing a crib by the window. She had a small, smug, victorious smile on her lips. She thought she had won. She thought she always won. In a fraction of a second, a montage of my entire life flashed behind my eyes. I thought about the cheap plastic bus pass. I thought about the white BMW. I thought about the freezing dorm room and the vending machine dinners. I thought about the grueling night shifts at the diner. I thought about the $84,000 down payment I had scraped together through years of absolute misery. Something inside of me finally snapped. It was not a loud, explosive snap. It was a quiet, permanent, and final click, like a heavy steel vault locking into place. I stood up from my chair. No, I said. The dining room went dead silent. Excuse me, my dad said, his neck suddenly turning a bright, angry shade of red. No, I said again, louder this time. I kept my voice perfectly steady, though my knees were shaking so hard I thought I might collapse. I will not sign that deed. I will not move out of my house. And I will absolutely not pay for Chelsea to live here. Paige, my mom gasped, clutching her pearls. How can you be so incredibly cruel to your pregnant sister? It is not cruel to keep what is legally mine, I fired back. I worked for this. I bled for this. Chelsea has never worked for a single thing in her entire life because you hand her absolutely everything on a silver platter. I won't do it. Chelsea immediately started to cry. It was a loud, dramatic, wailing cry. She buried her face in her hands. I knew it, Chelsea sobbed loudly. I knew she would be exactly like this. She's jealous. She has always been jealous of me. That is enough, my dad roared. He stood up and slammed his massive hand flat on the table. The crystal wine glasses shook and chimed against each other. You ungrateful little brat. After absolutely everything we did for you. We raised you. We put a roof over your head. We fed you. You did the absolute bare minimum required by law. I yelled back, my voice echoing off the glass walls. You gave me a bus pass while you gave her a BMW. You told me to figure it out while you fully funded her beach vacations. Well, I figured it out, Dad. I figured it out. I bought this house, and you cannot have it. My dad loomed over the table, pointing a thick finger directly at my face. His eyes were completely devoid of love. They were full of pure hate. If you do not sign this paper by Monday morning, he hissed, we will take you to court. We will sue you for everything you have. We will completely ruin you. Get out, I said, pointing rigidly toward the front door. Get out of my house right now. You will deeply regret this, my mom spat, grabbing her purse. You are ice cold, Paige. I don't know how I raised a monster like you. They stormed out, slamming the heavy door behind them. 3 days later, the real nightmare began. A courier arrived at my door and handed me a thick envelope from Miller and Associates. It was a formal legal complaint. They were actually suing me, claiming my down payment was commingled family funds under a fake oral family trust. At the exact same time, Chelsea's supposedly absent boyfriend, Derek, posted a massive, viral rant on Facebook, completely assassinating my character, calling me a greedy monster who threw a pregnant woman onto the streets. The comments poured in from aunts, uncles, and cousins, all praying for my wicked soul. Then, I received a chilling voicemail from my mother, warning me that my father's blood pressure was spiking and that if I didn't surrender, they would destroy my reputation forever. I sat on my couch, feeling completely terrified. I almost picked up the phone to surrender. But then I looked across the room at my heavy floor safe. I thought of Fiona Thorne. I stood up, opened the safe, and pulled out the black binder. They wanted a war. They were about to get one. I did not call my mother back. I did not text my father to negotiate. Instead, I opened my laptop and searched for a name Fiona Thorne had given me years ago, an attorney she kept on retainer for vicious corporate disputes. I found her number and dialed. The next morning, I walked into the offices of Valerie Vargas. Her office was located on the top floor of a steel and glass tower on the wealthy side of the city. The entire waiting room smelled like expensive leather, polished mahogany, and sheer intimidation. Valerie was a surprisingly small woman, but her presence took up the entire room. She wore a sharp, crimson blazer and thick, black-rimmed glasses. She did not offer me coffee. She did not offer me a warm smile or false sympathy. She pointed a perfectly manicured finger at the leather chair opposite her massive desk. "Sit down," she commanded. "Show me exactly what you have." I placed the heavy black binder onto her desk. For 20 agonizing minutes, the absolute only sound in that room was the crisp flipping of paper pages. Valerie read incredibly fast. Her eyes scanned the official purchase agreements, my bank statements showing the exact origin of the $84,000 down payment, and the notarized affidavit of my sole ownership. She paused slightly at the color-coded spreadsheet where I had meticulously tracked my parents' refusal to help me over the past decade. She stopped entirely at the intelligence section in the back, where I had filed credit reports and property tax records I had quietly uncovered about my family years ago. Finally, she closed the heavy binder. She took off her black glasses, placed them on the desk, and looked right at me. A small, terrifying, absolutely predatory smile played on her lips. "They're absolute idiots," Valerie said. I let out a massive, shaking breath that I felt like I had been holding for 3 days. "So, they don't have a real case?" "Paige," Valerie said, leaning forward and steepling her fingers. "They don't have a case. They have a fairy tale. They are claiming an oral family trust. In real estate law, the statute of frauds strictly requires all property transfer agreements to be in writing. Unless they have a signed, notarized document from you stating this penthouse was a trust, they are blowing smoke. They filed this frivolous lawsuit to scare you into submission. They think you are still the weak little girl who desperately wants mommy and daddy's approval." She tapped the cover of the black binder. "But this is a masterpiece. Most people trust their families. That is their fatal mistake. I learned the hard way not to trust them," I said quietly. "Good," Valerie said, standing up and walking over to a large whiteboard. She grabbed a red marker. "Because we are not just going to defend you. We are going to completely dismantle them. Here is the strategy." She drew 3 aggressive circles on the board. Step 1. We file an immediate motion for declaratory judgment. We ask the judge to look at your pristine deed and officially declare you the sole, undisputed owner. Step 2. We file a massive counterclaim for abuse of process. They use the legal system to harass and extort you. We sue them for all of your legal fees. We sue them for defamation regarding Derek's Facebook posts. We sue them for severe emotional distress, and we put a hard dollar figure on it. $50,000. My eyes widened. Sue them back. Bullies only respect pain, Valerie said coldly. If you want them to stop, you have to make it far too expensive for them to continue. And step 3, this is the kill shot. We audit them. She turned back to me, her eyes shining with legal malice. During the discovery phase, we legally demand to see every single piece of their finances. We force them to hand over their bank statements. We force them to reveal exactly why they need your equity so badly. I felt a cold shiver go down my spine. It was brutal. Do it, I said without hesitation. I will draft the papers tonight, Valerie nodded. But Paige, you need to be ready. When I file this, they are going to scream. They will try to contact you. You cannot engage. No calls. No texts. Silence is your shield. Let me be your sword. I went home and followed her instructions perfectly. I blocked my parents' phone numbers. I blocked Chelsea. I blocked Derek. I blocked every single aunt and cousin who had commented on the post. 2 days later, my family showed up at my building, completely frantic. The concierge buzzed me, warning me they were screaming in the lobby. I simply told the doorman to call the police if they did not leave immediately. They fled before the sirens arrived. My silence was working, but nothing could have prepared me for the devastating, ugly truth Valerie uncovered during the financial audit. The mandatory discovery phase cracked my family's facade wide open. Valerie made good on her promise and subpoenaed every single financial record my parents and sister possessed. We found out the deep, ugly truth behind the sudden, desperate ambush for my penthouse. My parents were not just in debt. They were completely and utterly insolvent. Valerie laid the official bank documents out on her desk for me to see. The numbers were staggering. There was a massive $125,000 second mortgage taken out on their suburban house, and it was currently 60 days past due. They had over $40,000 in high-interest credit card debt. They had completely drained my dad's life insurance policy. And Chelsea was a financial black hole. She owed money to 3 different banks, and she had a repossessed vehicle on her record from last year that they had completely hidden from everyone. Altogether, the family was hiding a debt scheme approaching $400,000. They were literally weeks away from total financial ruin and foreclosure. That was exactly why they wanted my penthouse. Because I had put down a massive cash deposit and paid the mortgage aggressively, I had hundreds of thousands of dollars in pure home equity. If I signed the deed over to Chelsea, they could immediately use the apartment as collateral to refinance, pull all my cash out, and bail themselves out of their massive failures. But that was not the worst part. Look at this, Valerie said, pointing a sharp pen at Raymond's personal bank statements from 10 years ago. Look at these exact dates. I leaned in. October 4th, $500 cash withdrawal at a casino. October 12th, $800 cash withdrawal at a casino. October 20th, $1,200 withdrawal at a casino. I stared at the black ink. The dates perfectly matched the exact semester I had begged for textbook money. My dad had a massive, hidden gambling addiction. He had not lost my college fund to a slow economy. He had literally gambled my future away at slot machines and card tables. And now he was trying to steal the roof over my head to feed his disease. We have them by the throat, Valerie whispered. On November 2nd, the day of the final settlement conference, the air in the boardroom on the 40th floor was freezing. I sat on one side of the long mahogany table with Valerie. My black binder sat directly in front of me. My family walked in. They looked absolutely destroyed. My dad looked 10 years older, his skin gray and sagging. My mom clutched her purse like a shield, looking terrified. Chelsea glared at me, but she looked exhausted. Their lawyer, Mr. Gentry, opened his briefcase with a heavy sigh. "Let's keep this civil," Mr. Gentry started. "My clients just want a fair resolution to ensure the safety of the new grandchild." "There is absolutely no resolution involving my client's property," Valerie snapped, her voice cracking like a whip. "The property belongs solely to Paige Miller. Period." "We have witnesses," my dad blustered, trying to sound tough. "People who heard us talk about the family trust." "You have drinking buddies, Bob," Valerie corrected, intentionally using the wrong name to diminish him. "And we have bank records." Valerie stood up. She slid a thick packet of financial papers across the table directly to Mr. Gentry. He picked them up and started reading. I watched the color completely drain from his face. He went absolutely pale. He stopped reading, slowly lowered the papers, and looked at my dad in horror. "Raymond," Mr. Gentry whispered, his voice shaking. "Is this accurate?" My dad stared at the table, refusing to speak. What does it say? Chelsea demanded frantically. It says, Valerie answered loudly, that your parents are insolvent. It says your father has gambled away hundreds of thousands of dollars. It says you, Chelsea, have a repossessed car and massive bank defaults. The only reason you want Paige's penthouse is to steal her equity to pay for your catastrophic mistakes. That is a lie. We are a family, my mom screamed, bursting into tears. If you were a family, I said quietly, speaking for the very first time. The entire room froze and looked at me. You wouldn't be trying to steal my home. You wouldn't be lying about me on the internet to ruin my career. I opened my binder and slid a single sheet of paper across the table. This is the settlement, I said coldly. You drop your lawsuit with prejudice today, meaning you can never file it again. You acknowledge I am the sole owner. You cease all harassment immediately. If you ever mention my name publicly again, I will release these casino ledgers and your debt records to the public, your friends, and the internet. My dad looked at Valerie, then at his own lawyer. Mr. Gentry simply closed his file and shook his head. We're done, Raymond. Sign it. My dad slumped in his leather chair. He looked incredibly small. His hand trembled violently as he took the pen Valerie offered and signed the paper. My mom signed next, weeping softly, refusing to look at me. Chelsea signed last, aggressively scribbling her name and throwing the pen down on the table. I hope you're happy, Chelsea hissed at me. You have your big empty house, and you have absolutely no one. I have myself, I replied calmly. Valerie took the paper, checked the signatures, and nodded at me. We stood up and walked out of the glass room. I did not look back. I stepped into the elevator, and when the metal doors finally closed, shutting them out of my life forever, I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for 14 years. 6 months passed. The silence in my life was beautiful. Through the grapevine, I heard that my parents were forced to sell a small rental property they owned at a massive loss just to avoid immediate foreclosure. My dad was forced out of retirement and had to take a part-time job wearing an apron at a local hardware store to pay off his gambling debts. Chelsea did not move into a luxury penthouse. She and Derek moved to a cheap, industrial warehouse town 2 states away where rent was low. As for me, I took my undisputed, clean title and refinanced my penthouse. I secured a much lower interest rate. With the extra money I saved every month, I called my old university. I established a permanent financial fund specifically for students working full-time night shifts to survive. I named it the Fiona Thorne Scholarship. A few weeks later, my birthday rolled around. I checked my mail and found a cheap card from my mother. Inside, in her handwriting, it simply said, "We miss you." There was no apology, no mention of the lawsuit, just an attempt to sweep it under the rug. Right beneath it was an email notification on my phone from Chelsea, complaining about her rent being late and asking if I wanted to see baby pictures. I typed a single reply, "I will not be providing financial assistance now or in the future. Do not contact me again." I hit send, and I permanently blocked their final digital footprints. That night, I hosted a dinner party in my penthouse. It wasn't for blood relatives. It was for my chosen family. Valerie came. My realtor, Courtney, came. My old college friends came. We drank fine wine, ate roast beef, and laughed until our sides hurt. I looked out at the glittering city lights and realized something crucial. You absolutely cannot set yourself on fire just to keep other people warm, especially when those people are the ones holding the matches. Protecting what you built is not selfish. It is self-respect. Am I wrong? Should I have let them back into my life, or was I right to protect what I built? Tell me your story in the comments. I read every single one. Thanks for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button now. We are in this together, and we are stronger than they are.